In the fury of combat, time does not merely halt, it fractures into fragments. What seems an eternity may in fact be a single, brutal hour. This is the raw reality of command, where every choice is weighed in blood and life, and the divide between victory and annihilation is defined by the valor of men defending a stone barrier. We are taken to the smoke-obscured summit of Cemetery Ridge on July 3, 1863, to stand with a Union general as he observes the final chapter of the Battle of Gettysburg, the notorious Picketts charge. Through his perspective, we see not the clean theories of a map, but the thunderous noise, the suffocating grit, and the immense burden of leadership confronting a fabled infantry advance. If you appreciate our historical content, we'd be grateful for your support. Please like and subscribe to help us continue sharing these stories. This is the tale of the handful who faced the multitude, a decisive historical instant captured in a direct testimony of unmatched power. It could easily have been an era. In reality, it may have been 1 hour, or possibly 3, or even 5. The measurement of time under such conditions, no matter how exact the clock, turns deeply untrustworthy for those who are experiencing it. Becoming tired of watching men and horses be ripped apart, and observing that while some shells hit and blew up around us, most flew high and burst behind our position, it occurred to me that a spot farther forward could be safer. Getting to my feet, I advanced with my aide, Lieutenant Haskell, beside me. I had moved just a few paces when 3 of Cushing's ammunition chests blew up at once, catapulting their contents in a great pillar of dense smoke high into the sky. And above the chaos, the enemy's exultant cries could be heard as they saw the result of their bombardment. Moving past the group of trees identified as marking this segment of our line, we continued to the fence where the troops were lying low behind it. Motioning for them to clear a path, I stepped across the wall, walked to a small clump of bushes situated directly ahead of the line, and gazed out from that point to see if I could detect any activity happening in that area. Nothing could be seen but the smoke endlessly streaming from the lengthy row of cannon, and nothing could be heard but the constant thunder of hundreds of guns, the screaming of countless shells as they ripped through the air all around, and the blast of explosions. These all traveled over our heads and usually detonated to our rear. While standing there and considering how this entire tumult would end, Mitchell, an aide to General Hancock, found me with an inquiry from Hancock wanting to know what I thought was the goal of this massive bombardment. I replied that I believed it was the introduction either to a retreat or to an assault. After staying there for a period and noting that the enemy did not depress the aim of their cannon, we walked to the left, still outside the main formation, the soldiers watching us with interest from behind the stone wall as we passed. As we neared the left flank of my division, the line bent somewhat forward, beyond which was the spring referenced in the description of the landscape. As we got close to the boggy ground beneath it, I pointed out to Lieutenant Haskell a soldier who had obviously left his unit ahead to get water. Several canteens were hung around his neck, and he was crawling back through the wet soil, staying as near to the earth as possible, clearly fearful of the shot and shells shrieking above him. As we approached, I shouted to him, "Be careful, soldier! You could be hit." Hearing my voice, he turned his head, still pressed as tightly to the ground as he could, to look toward me, and then, as if struck by a sudden idea, rose to his feet and walked determinedly back to his regiment, undoubtedly telling himself that if 2 officers could remain standing, there was little danger for a third. Looping around to the left of my line, I was traveling behind it, returning toward the right, when I saw a soldier crossing the field carrying another, obviously injured, on his back. Just as they came level with us, they reached a low stone wall, which one was trying to climb while still carrying the other. I stopped and told Haskell to help them, and we then continued on our way. The cannonade from both sides had by now greatly lessened, and only a sporadic shell was coming from the enemy's batteries. As we headed toward the right, a staff officer, with an orderly who was holding my horse, met me with word that the enemy was approaching in great numbers. I swiftly got into the saddle and rode to the hill's crest, where a splendid yet horrifying sight met my eyes. The enemy, in a long gray line, was marching straight toward us, across the rolling ground before us, their flags flying in the air and acting as markers for their ranks. Preceding them was a thick skirmish line, which was driving ours back at a run. Behind this first line, another could be seen, and then a third, and the whole body moved like huge waves of men, steadily and relentlessly. Quickly instructing Haskell to ride to General Meade and tell him the enemy was attacking us in strength, and that we would need all the support he could send, I commanded the guns of Arnold's battery to be rolled to the wall and loaded with double canister, and then rode along my line, telling the soldiers to withhold their fire until the first enemy line had crossed the Emmitsburg road. By this time, bullets were flying quite densely along the line, and batteries from other parts of the field had begun firing upon the moving host before us. The leading enemy line reached the Emmitsburg road, and hastily climbing over the two fences, halted briefly to regroup, and then began ascending the slope. My division had up to this point fired very few shots, but now from the low stone wall on either side of the angle, every musket along its extent let loose a tremendous volley. From my station on the left, I could see the terrible results. The mounted officers in the rear were seen to fall before it, and as the subsequent lines came on and scrambled over the fences, men dropped from the top rails, yet the mass pushed onward right up to our very guns in the stone wall ahead. I noted after all three lines had merged that the men on the right of the attacking force were continually moving inward to their left, plainly to fill gaps opened by our fire, and that the right of their line was hesitating behind the thicket where I had stood during the cannonade. To our left of this spot was a regiment from the division, and keen to aid the fierce fight now taking place on the hill to the right. I attempted to get this regiment to swing out to the front by a changed front forward on the right company, to hit the enemy's line in the flank and sweep along the front of our position. But in the noise and disorder of the battle, it was difficult to make my orders clear. Few who do not know the rigid requirements of discipline and of how a proper military force must be an instrument that functions at the direction of one commander as completely as a train answers to its engineer, not in all things, but in every function the train was built to follow, can understand the vital significance of drill and discipline in a moment such as the one we now faced. In my hurry to get the regiment to swing out and perform my plan, I urged my horse in front of it and signaled the left flank to move forward. I was suddenly made aware of the foolish position I had assumed when the entire regiment discharged their weapons. I moved to the rear as fast as possible, looking to my left to see if I could find troops there who might be induced to perform my orders. I saw a unit lying behind a small barricade I had personally directed to be built the day before, and digging my spurs into my horse, I rode for it. Just before I reached the place, to my amazement, the men started a withdrawal to the rear, even though there was no fire of any note on their front. With some difficulty, I persuaded the command to go back to their barricade, directed the attention of the officers and men to the great numbers falling back from the attacking column, which were clearly visible, and then sure I could gain no benefit from that command, I rode quickly back to my own division, and again tried to get its left to swing out. While occupied with this, I felt a sharp blow apparently behind my left shoulder. I soon began to feel dizzy from the bleeding which was running from my left hand. I told my aide to hand command of the division over to General Harrow, and accompanied by another staff officer, Captain Francis Wessels of the 106th Pennsylvania. I quit the field, the noises of the battle on the hill still ringing in my ears.